Growing up in the 1980s, all of my favorite games and activities involved an element of creativity. One of my favorite toys, above all else, was Spirograph. Spirograph is a geometric drawing toy, for which you can have a pen and a set of concentric plastic circles or gears. And with those gears, you can create literally thousands upon thousands of mathematical roulette curves. They're also known as hypertrochoids and epitrochoids. This is how it works. And like the plastic gears, you're constrained with the amount of designs that you can actually create. And the main reason for that is that the designs are predetermined. They're built into the design of the actual toy. So when I was about 7 or 8 years old, I got bored of playing with it. And the reason that I did is that, unlike my imagination, I knew that it had limits. I knew that it was constrained. I knew that there was boundaries to what I could actually create. And this is one of the things that I love about imagination and creativity, is that fundamentally, it's limitless. This is my son when he was 5 years old. And he's found an interesting game to play with, probably pretending to be an astronaut or something. And he's done that with what looks like a cornflakes box. And he's a chip off the old block, as you can probably imagine. So I got to university age, and I was lucky enough to be accepted in one of the UK's best design schools. And I found myself learning all about machine tooling, manufacturing techniques, sustainable design, all these wonderful things that absolutely inspired me, and I loved learning about them. And after 4 of the best years of my life, I graduated, and I was a professional designer. And I found a job with an agency, and I found myself working with some of the world's most recognizable brands, which was incredible. You'd think I'd be happy, right? Wrong. I was absolutely and utterly miserable. I felt disconnected, disenfranchised, and disillusioned with what the industry was. I was working on campaigns, designing everything from toothpaste to toothbrushes, and it felt like I was disconnected from my heart and my head. Fundamentally, my values and my actions were misaligned, and I didn't feel good about it at all. In fact, I felt like I'd sold out. A couple of years later, I was lucky enough to start my own agency, and I found some wonderful people, and I set up shop in the bottom of somebody's garden in a converted tram workshop. It was a far cry from the London creative industry, but it didn't matter one bit. I was in control of my own destiny, and I could work with the type of people that really inspired me and aligned with my values. I was working with everyone from climate activists to social reformers, disaster relief charities, education, healthcare, homelessness, and it was wonderful. It was a great time. But around this time, the world changed. It changed in such a way that we were discovering new relationships with clients and finding that quite promptly they were disappearing off into the ether, and we didn't really understand why. It turned out that there was an emergence at the time of online digital marketplaces where you could actually buy and sell designs. You could log on, you could set up an account, and you could post a job. And literally, it was a case of designers would bid for work. Now, there's a part of me that agrees with this. I think that online marketplaces are really a double-edged sword. They're great in one way, because it gives an opportunity to people like me to break into what we can be honest is quite an elitist, closed industry in terms of the creative industry. But they're bad in another way, because there's a disconnect between creative and client, between designer and the person who's commissioned the design. You may have come across these websites. People Pay Hours, Flyer, Upworth, 98 Degrees. I've actually changed the name of these because I wanted to avoid litigation. But I'm sure some of you would have come across them. The emergence and development of this online marketplace where you can buy and sell design has showed no sign of abating. In fact, like other industries in the digital space, it's actually expanding quite rapidly. And that would be a good thing, right? Because more contributors means more competition, more choice, and higher quality? Very possibly. I've got a friend who works in AI, and closely hot on the heels of these online marketplaces came AI into the design space. My friend Steve Alejandro, he works for a company called AI Brain in Palo Alto, California, and he explained to me that there's going to be 3 phases of the AI revolution: the AI economy, the AI military, and the AI society. And at the moment, we're in the AI economy. The consulting firm McKinsey estimates that within about 15 years, taking us up to roughly 2030, 35, $70 trillion of value will be created by just the AI systems that we've got now. So these AI systems are deep learning systems. They are things like chatbots, image recognition, text translation. So the question I'm asking myself at this point is, will AI take my job? It's a question that is really worrying me because, if I'm honest, design and creativity is the only thing that I've ever really wanted to do in life. So there's a study recently by 2 Oxford University researchers called Carl Friedrich and Michael Osborne, that said that by the year 2033, 47% of jobs in the US economy could be automated. 47%. That's nearly half in the next 14 years. So where does that leave us? I became interested in whether AI could be used to produce creative output. It's something that I'm really interested in. And I'm interested in this because I want to prove to myself that it can't. Can a machine fool us? And interestingly, I wasn't the first person to theorize on this subject. The Turing Test, named after Alan Turing here of Enigma fame, he proposed that machine learning would be intelligent when it could produce a result comparable to or indistinguishable from that of a human being. So I thought to myself, can I design a test similar to pit my creative abilities, our creative abilities as an agency, against an AI system? So this is how we did it. We went looking for AI systems that were professing to be able to produce creative output. And there's quite a few out there on the market. There are web builders, pattern makers, and logo makers. So what we decided to do was focus on 2 logo makers in particular. We created a test where we asked an AI system to produce a set of logos, and we would choose one and pit it within a presentation to a live client. And the only 2 rules that we created in this test were, number 1, we wouldn't tell the client, obviously, and we wouldn't tell the whole team which of the logos was created by an artificial intelligence and which wasn't. We hid these logos inside a collection of designs. And the second rule that we came up with, that if the client chose the logo which was created by an artificial intelligence, then we would confess to the nature of the experiment, we'd explain the outcomes and why we'd done it, the objectives, and lastly, we'd refund all money paid to us. Now, as you can imagine, this wasn't the most responsible management decision that I've made this year, okay? But thankfully, I was completely vindicated, and none of the logos were chosen by a client. This is actually a live brief. It's gone out now. It's been selected by the client. And it was very interesting. So what has the experiment told me? What's it taught me? the most important thing that it's taught me is, firstly, our responsibility as designers and creatives is to synthesize a lot of data around us and to create a creative response that will meet the client's briefs. But the second thing, and the most important thing, is that we're tasked with creating a relationship of trust with our clients. They're supposed to have trust in us and our creative abilities, and they pay us to do so. So it's really important that we did them justice. There's another study from the same researchers at the University of Oxford, Carl Benedict Frey and Michael Osborne, that looks at creativity and will creativity be surpassed by machine learning. And out of those 47% of jobs in the US, it's kind of prophesized by this study that the most resistant to automation will be creative jobs, which is good news for us. When I was researching this, I came across another test of artificial intelligence, and this is a really interesting one. The Lovelace Test 2.0, named after Ada Lovelace, the 19th century mathematician, it uses creativity as a benchmark for intelligence. So the fundamentals of the test are that if a machine can be given a problem to solve or something original to create, and its output is surprising to the programmer, if the programmer can't explain where that creative output came from, then the machine, the artificial intelligence, can be described as truly intelligent. I had the pleasure of meeting and speaking with another researcher, Dr. Gurija Kamal, who works for Drexel University in America. And she helped me to see a really important distinction, to make a really important distinction between a computer and the human brain. And she said that our brain is not a computer. Our brain is actually a creative machine, because what it's doing, it's not just processing information that it gets from the senses, but it's also predicting what's good for us in the future and what could keep us alive as a species, I guess, as well. The interesting part of this hypothesis is, by imagining our futures, we could actually be creating them. So we've got imagination, intention, behavior, and action. And this is really important at the moment. We've heard some really powerful talks today talking about climate change in particular. And this is a really important thing for me, because what we have to do is imagine a future that we all want to live in. When I set out this talk, I wanted to conclude by saying that we should teach children to think more creatively, to break out of their metaphorical boxes or break out of their plastic rings, as it were. But I have to say that the world needs AI. And perhaps it's the other way around. Perhaps we need to introduce machine learning to the creativity of the human mind so that we can all imagine and live in the world that we want to. Thank you.